This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. K-State weed specialist Sarah Lancaster kicks off the show as she reminds listeners about managing Marestail and Henbit, as well as preparing their sprayers for winter. Joe Parcell, director of the Risk Management Center at K-State, continues the show as he explains a project that he is a part of that is working on the ability to add value to wastewater. Wrapping today's show is K-State horticulture entomologist Raymond Cloyd as he looks at pests that are currently trying to get in homes and how a clean garden can prevent pests from overwintering in the debris. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Thursday show discussing a couple of weeds that growers might want to work on getting control of if it is in their fields. And then to talk about this, we're joined by K-State weed specialist Sarah Lancaster. Sarah, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on today, Shelby.
Sarah, first wanting to start off with Henbit, and can you tell us a little bit about Henbit?
Yeah, I'm going to wager that the majority of our listeners, Shelby, are familiar with Henbit. We often think about it in the spring when we see those purple flowers kind of light up all of the fields. About the time the red buds start blooming, the Henbit starts flowering in the spring. But really, a good time to think about controlling it is now. And it's always a problem. Well, I shouldn't say always. It's often a problem for us. Now is a great time of year for it to start emerging. But over the last couple of weeks, Shelby, I've been sent and seen some photos of fields where I think it's not normally this bad of a problem. And so I thought it would be a good time, for us to kind of maybe review some of what we know about Henbit management.
Any guesses as to why this year it might be feeling like more of a problem?
Yeah, I think we had a big window of warm weather. I told someone yesterday, to me, it felt like fall kind of started late. And so when we think about, soil temperatures and the temperature range in which Henbit likes to germinate, really the month of October was almost every day was perfect for Henbit germination and Henbit growth. And so I think it's just one of those things, right?
How does a producer need to go about controlling it or hopefully controlling it?
Yeah, so when it's small, probably the most economical way to go about controlling weeds that have come up are combinations of 2,4-D and dicamba. So that'll take care of what's up. But things that have good activity for residual control would be products like Valor, Spartan, metribuzin containing products, and then products like Classic. So, those are pretty typical things that we see guys putting out in the fall. You might also pick up some activity on early emerging summer annuals, depending on the rate, the application timing, things of that nature. So yeah, kind of long story short there, Shelby, would be something with 2,4-D and dicamba for merged. And then probably the most cost-effective product on that list is going to be flumioxazin. We should be careful about how much Valor that we're using, but that's a story for another day.
While we are getting more into our winter type months and maybe cooling down in temperatures, do we need to make sure that weed is per se growing when we want to spray it or try to control it?
Yeah, this time of year and early spring, I get lots of questions about, well, should I spray today? I've got a, nice sunny day. Should I spray today? Knowing that cold weather's coming. And so kind of the rule of thumb there, Shelby, we want to make sure that low temperatures are above freezing, and we want high temperatures, kind of right at or right above or above 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's kind of our temperature range that we're looking for. The other thing to be aware of is that we need, let's say, 3 to 5 days before our application and 3 to 5 days after our application. So you're kind of looking for a window of a week, really, of suitable weather to make sure those weeds are growing well at the time of application, and also while they're moving all that herbicide around to where it needs to go to effectively kill the plant.
And another weed that people might be dealing with in their fields, mare's tail. And is it seeming like this weed is also a bit more prevalent this year than it has been in the past?
So, I had some folks talking to me this summer that they felt like there was a little bit more Marestail than they have seen in recent years. I saw a couple of places where I would say that might be correct. And again, what that means basically is if it didn't get controlled well, kind of last spring and summer, we're going to have a potential for more emergence here this fall. So Marestail is another one of those plants, Shelby, that we always kind of have and need to think about, right? It can definitely be a challenge. The thing about mare's tail is that it's a plant that bolts, right? So here in the fall, it's mostly going to be kind of short rosettes, kind of hard to see, right? Because they grow real close to the ground. And to be honest, a little bit of a pain to identify from things like mustards and dandelions and other things that tend to be rosette stage this time of year. So on the ground, little furry rosettes that are relatively easier to control than if we wait until spring, right? So this is a weed that we definitely need to do kind of a fall application with some residual herbicides rather than trying to wait until spring. So one of the other differences between henbit and Marestail is that Marestail has a lot more cases of resistance, right? So for henbit, we've documented ALS resistance. But for Marestail, we have ALS resistance and glyphosate resistance, and it's more prevalent across the countryside.
Is that meaning that producers, if they have it, they need to hit it hard the first time?
Yeah, so I think it means we need to think a little bit more about what herbicides we're using and making sure we're going out with a good residual program now, in addition to something that's going to provide some control of those rosettes that are already up.
Are there other strategies for hoping to control mare's tail besides chemicals?
So mare's tail really started becoming a problem when we started adopting no-till. It's easily controlled by tillage, but that being said, there's a lot of reasons why we like to reduce tillage in our systems. So that's an option. There's also some evidence that if you can get a cover crop well established before mare's tail starts to emerge, you can have success in suppressing that mare's tail growth. The problem is, right, you're probably going to be seeding your cover crops about the same time that the mare's tail is starting to germinate and emerge. And so you may not have enough cover crop biomass or enough plant growth in your cover crop to actually suppress the horseweed growth when you need it to work.
While we are thinking about herbicides, what are some different options that growers have?
Yeah, so as far as thinking about emerged mare's tail, some good products would be dicamba. Dicamba is generally better than 2,4-D on mare's tail. Sharpen can be effective, and glufosinate can be effective, but those are going to be a little more expensive than a dicamba application. Other things to think about, right? We talked about the importance of getting good residual herbicides. A lot of the products that we talked about for henbit control are also going to give us good residual activity of mare's tail. So that's going to include things like our Flumiaxis and our Valor containing products. We talked about metribuzin, we talked about Spartan, and we talked about Classic when we were talking about henbit. So, those are our kind of foundations for kind of that fall or maybe very, very early pre-plant type of application to go after these winter annual weeds.
And while we're thinking about spraying weeds this time of year, wanting to remember the sprayer, and what are a few things for growers to keep in mind as it might be getting time to put the sprayer away?
Yeah, so that's the hard part about making fall herbicide recommendations is that at some point the ground freezes, which means the application is off label. And also, if you don't have a good heated shed to put your sprayer in, you're going to need to put it away for the winter, right? And so it's always kind of good to talk about taking care of those tools that are important to our operations. And we've started to see some freezing temperatures. So thinking about winterizing sprayers, right? Not super complicated. You're going to want to make sure your sprayer is clean before you start winterizing it. It's a good time to kind of review some of those moving parts and pieces. The pump, for example, make sure it's still in good shape. Pressure gauges shouldn't freeze. And then checking, filters and nozzles and valves and screens and all of those kinds of things. We don't want to put that away dirty. It's a good time to get that cleaned up. But then the big piece is to make sure you've got the water out of it, obviously, and then make sure you get some antifreeze circulated through that system. to make sure that, again, things don't freeze up and cause issues. I guess the other caveat there is those things we ran through really quickly, Shelby, and that we talked about in the e-update are just kind of rules of thumb, right? Pretty much everybody's going to have some specific instructions in their owner's manual, and their equipment dealer can probably help them out as well. So just putting that on folks' radar because it's that time of year.
And even if producers and growers do have a heated shed, maybe a good idea to go ahead and clean out their sprayer.
Yeah, I mean, sort of like cleaning out your combine before you put it away for the winter. It's just a good time to kind of take a breath and reset and go through all those parts and pieces so that when you're ready for spring, you can at least have the parts on hand before you need to get it out of the shed in the spring.
Sarah, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
My pleasure, Shelby.
That was K-State weed specialist Sarah Lancaster. If you'd like to read more on these topics, there are agronomy e-update articles where you can do that. If you'd like to read more on Marestail, you can go to the September 26th e-update and read the article, Get Control of Fall Emerged Marestail Before Next Spring. If you'd like to read more about winterizing your sprayer or henbit, you can do that by checking out the October 23rd e-update. In that e-update, you will find articles, henbit taking over, management tips for fall, and preparing spray systems for winter, simple steps to avoid spring repairs. I will link all three of these articles in today's show notes on agtoday.net, or you can find them for yourself by going to eupdate.agronomy.ksu.edu. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but stick around because we have more for you up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show talking about a project that is being worked on at K-State. And then to talk about it, we're joined by the director of the Risk Management Center at K-State, who is also a professor of agricultural economics, Joe Parcell. Joe, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, good morning, Shelby. Thanks for having me.
Joe, can you tell us a little bit about what is this project?
So Shelby, this is a pretty unique project, and it's funded by the National Science Foundation, led by Kansas State University. And I think the important thing here, I'm going to kind of lead it off before I'm actually going to talk about what it is that we're looking at. It's common not just to animals out there, but humans too, and that's our waste products that come from us. And the project it's not to look at a problem out there. It's really looking at how we can enhance some of the great work that's already being done. And that's looking at digesters that are using the effluent from or waste from both communities and animal livestock operations. And we're looking at incrementally how we can add value in the future to those streams that come out of the digesters.
You mentioned that K-State is leading this, but is there a full team with it?
Yeah, Shelby, it is, and it's a really big team. So overall, and just put this in perspective, this is a 4-year, $6.5 million project across 4 different institutions. So it's led by Kansas State University, but we've also got collaborators from the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, Oklahoma State University, and then our partner here in Kansas is Seward County Community College out in Liberal, Kansas, in there. And it's a diverse group. We've got engineers on this project. We've got social scientists. Myself, I'm doing the economic and financial analysis. We've got sociology involved. We've got practitioners involved in the field, and it really, and on the teaching side too. And this is where Seward County comes in for helping train for future technicians that might be involved in working with digesters that are becoming more prevalent out in Western Kansas.
Joe, while we're thinking about the people at K-State, what different departments or parts of the campus are involved?
Yeah, Shelby, that's what makes this project so exciting is, it includes 3 different colleges and 4 different individuals that are helping lead this at K-State. We've got civil engineering, we've got biological and agricultural engineering represented on this. We've got sociology, which is going to be out of the College of Arts and Sciences. We've got agricultural economics, which is going to be out of the College of Agriculture in there. So we've got really a little bit of everything sprinkled into this grant, which again, and when we look across the other institutions, they even bring in more breadth to this, and that's what it takes to move the needle.
Would you say this is more of an innovation than it is an invention?
Yeah, it is. It's about, and it's a great way of saying it there, because digesters have been around for a few decades. The uptake on them has been kind of hit and miss, and a lot of that's been driven historically by policies and subsidies, maybe mainly at the federal level. Incentives that can help us build these is a way not just of dealing with. I won't, it's, well, I say it's a waste product. Kind of in quotes here, a waste product, but how we can transfer that waste product and make it into more valuable uses and more, environmentally sound uses. It's not we don't have problems now, but from this innovation standpoint, it's how I think of it as more a plug and play. How can we plug in new technologies into the existing digester systems that we have to, extract nutrients that might be in that waste stream, condense it, moving around more efficiently? How can we polish the water? And that's really the key of this project is, can we polish the water? And by polishing, I mean clean it up to a level where animals can drink it after it's been recycled through the process. So kind of speed up the natural process, making that more efficient so that we have a place to reuse that water right away in there.
What are some different avenues you see of people maybe being willing to adopt this and bring this into their operation?
In the project team's minds, and really the proposal was, two groups. One group is those that already have adopted digesters, and we have digesters out there in use in Kansas, and as you go east, particularly more prevalent as you get around more animal operations, but also around more people, just as a way of not just using the waste, because we're generating, one of the things we generate from this is energy. And wherever you have more energy use, you're going to have more digesters as well in there. But those that have already adopted the digesters, this again is a plug and play where they could plug this into their existing system. What I mean by plug is maybe we're adding a filtration system or multiple filtration systems. Or on the other hand, we're adding in a little bit more of a complex process that has to go through engineering steps to, again, pull out those nutrients and condense it down in there. The other one is those that maybe haven't adopted digesters yet because they're not financially viable for their location or for their size. The more we can do in the future to make these digesters more profitable, faster, at a smaller scale, it's going to speed up the adoption of those into those operations and be better for those operations and communities.
In this per se stair step project, where are you guys at?
Yeah, we have just begun. So this grant was just funded in August of this year, 2025. It's a 4-year process. We have 3 thrusts. So the way you can think about the thrust, the first thrust is really the engineers that are looking at improving the processes for the streams that are coming. So you can think of, the nitrate, the phosphorus, the salts. How can we condense those things down, even to make not just make the water more potable, but make it so maybe it can go on irrigation better on fields where they maybe hit limits for the salt content or phosphorus. How can we move that around? Is there a market for it? Again, in addition to the water, the second part really is the water itself. Is, can we polish this water? And that's both a regulatory issue, but also just an engineering challenge to remove all the sediments from that water so it could be moved back in as a potable water, even for livestock, because, a lot of times livestock have similar standards to humans in the quality of water. And then the third part is the social part. From the social sciences, the economic and financial viability, but also just the adoption of what does community think of this? What do producers think of this and potential adopters out there?
So, Joe, when you look at the big picture, if everything works out perfectly and everything goes smoothly, what's the dream at the end of this 4 years?
So, Shelby, the project team, our goal is that, again, we're moving the needle forward. And anytime you have innovation, there's incremental steps. And our goal is to move it forward so that in the future is if we run in, water's always a challenge. And that's really what drove this project. Water's a challenge. If we can have technologies available in the future that help us reuse water more efficiently, that's a win for everybody, not just the users of this. This is it's for the communities, the livestock producers, the crop producers in there. So that's our real goal. And along the way, if we can figure out ways to pull out those nutrients and condense them down in an efficient way, so we can make them portable, so we can move them away from maybe areas that don't need more nutrients to areas that are nutrient deficient, that again becomes a win. We might think of it as an environmental win, but it's really an economic and financial win for everybody in this process. And that's really what research and science is about.
We obviously here on Ag Today really care about our farmers and ranchers and people involved in agriculture, but do you see this impacting communities overall as well?
Yeah, absolutely, because we're seeing more and more communities move towards these anaerobic digestion systems. The best example out there is Dodge City, Kansas, where they have a covered their lagoons there. They're capturing the gas off that, upcycling the gas or cleaning the gas and moving it into higher value uses from that gas. So we're seeing this again, Dodge City being a little bit larger. It'd be nice again to bring these down to scale to allow other smaller communities to be able to do this. Again, not necessarily from an environmental standpoint, but from a financial standpoint of cheapening up their infrastructure as a way of finding markets for what they're producing there. What we see now again is a waste stream, adding value to our waste.
Joe, any final thoughts for our listeners?
Shelby, the final thought I'd leave folks is, this is a 4-year project. Hopefully along the way, we get to interact with a lot of folks out there around the state, both in agriculture and community. I hope they're curious, ask questions, and they join us in the journey of, again, moving the needle a little bit on an old technology that continues to evolve.
Joe, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thanks, Shelby.
That was Director of the Risk Management Center at K-State and Professor of Agricultural Economics, Joe Parcell. If you'd like to read more on this topic, I will link an article titled Water, Waste, and a Wicked Problem in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but we'll be right back.
Welcome back, and thanks for joining us on Agriculture Today. Along with Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. From Asian lady beetles to box elder bugs to clover mites, nuisance insect and mite pests are trying to work their way into homes. K-State horticultural entomologist Raymond Cloyd says the best defense to keep them out is to seal up the cracks and crevices of the home and the foundation. Raymond, we're at that time of year when the nuisance pests are starting to make their way from outside to inside.
Yeah, Jeff, as the temperature gets cooler, we're getting into the 30s and 40s, we have a series of insect and mite pests, more of a nuisance pest, not mostly a pest of humans or plants, that are going to decide to come in the house and overwinter. That includes the Asian ladybird beetle, which I know many are familiar with. It comes inside, congregates on the south side of the windows, and stays there until spring. They're active, but there are others like the box elder bug, the elm leaf beetle, cluster flies, clover mites. They'll be moving in. What can you do? Well, the first thing you should probably do is caulk any cracks and crevices on the south side of the foundation. That helps. You can spray a pyrethroid insecticide on the foundation to repel them, or once they're in, you can just vacuum them up and put them back outside. Many of them, like crickets, the millipedes and the centipedes that will be coming in, when the humidity is going to be low because the heaters are coming on, that will desiccate them and they won't survive. For the Asian ladybird beetle, you can vacuum them up and then put them back outside, or just leave them be and they will do their thing, and then they'll emerge in spring and get active in spring and want to go outside. So if you do have any questions regarding these we call nuisance pests, you can contact our office or a pest management professional about how best to deal with them. But I think the easiest way is exclusion. That is, caulking cracks and crevices and maybe applying a pyrethroid insecticide. You won't get them all, but you can mitigate the number that actually come in.
In terms of sanitation, then, if we keep the outside a little bit cleaner around the house, does that help?
It does help. Keeping mulch away, it just makes it more difficult for them to come in. I think clover mites is the main one for that. But sanitation this time of year is important because many of the insects that attack ornamentals and vegetables and even fruits, they overwinter in the debris. So if you're in the community garden and your peppers and your cucumbers and tomatoes are wilting and dying, remove them because some of the squash bug overwinters in debris and a number of others do. So sanitation is always the first line of defense in terms of plant protection. And this time of year, we're thinking about, removing overwintering sites so we don't, we possibly can not deal with so many for the next year. But sanitation is really critical. And if you have any questions, we do have a sanitation extension publication you can download online.
So would that primarily then be weeds and leaves, or does it go beyond that?
Weeds is critical, they'll die, but like debris, plant debris would be one. Leaves, I know there's issues about leaves as a mulch. You might want to run them through the mower to shred them up, and then you can use them. Again, some insects would use as overwintering sites. So especially large leaves like sycamore, small leaves like honey locust, probably not going to be so much. But you should probably, the best thing, like what I do, is I just mow over them, shred them up, and then, they're going to be so small and dilapidated, they're not going to serve as a source of overwintering. And, of course, you can save them and work them into your soil for next year for organic matter.
This would also be a good time then to start thinking about our pest programs?
I think this is always a time of year to say, why did I have a pest and what can I do next year to prevent it? And that's what we call a proactive strategy. If you had squash bugs, for example, we do have extension publications. You can always call our office or you call your county extension agent, horticulture agent. Try to be more proactive because pesticides, in this case insecticides and miticides, are not always going to be the answer. And of course, we do know that the broad spectrum materials will harm pollinators, including honeybees and bumblebees and native bees, and you don't want to do that. So think proactively. The old adage is the more you do in the front end, the less you're going to do in the back end. So that includes cultural practices, plant placement, fertility, watering and mulching and pruning, allowing good air circulation. That'll reduce disease problems. And if you do have to spray, it'll make it easy for good coverage.
Like you mentioned, a lot of publications out there, and the Extension Office, always a good place to start. You
can call the Department of Entomology there at Kansas State, or you can get online for some of our extension publications. You can contact your county horticulture agent, and they'll also guide you to the source of information that you need.
That's K-State horticultural entomologist Raymond Cloyd, with information on how to reduce insect and mite pest migration into the home, as well as cleaning up the garden to prevent insects from overwintering in debris. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.